Okay, everybody, so we're going to be going through metal embossing, but I'm going to call it metal tooling, just simply because we're going to be tooling other materials and the process is similar, so we're just going to call it tooling and stick with that. However, if you're going to Google or look up ideas, you're going to have to use the term embossing, E-M-B-O-S-S-I-N-G, okay? Coming into this video, you should have previously watched a lovely woman go through a video demonstration of the different techniques. So I have already done that work, and I only did the hearts, but when you come into this video, you're gonna have not only the hearts, but you're also gonna choose another shape, whether that's like a bubble letter, or maybe it's a flower petal, or a circle. Just try something different, just to get a little bit of practice under your belt, because you're gonna be working with this for a while. So the difference is, we're going to start on this end. So engraving is the most subtle of all of them, and that's where you just work on your hard surface and draw right on the top of your metal. Okay, so that's going to be the most subtle. That's going to be the thinnest lines, the thinnest designs with the least amount of raised or pushed down. And you can do that on either the front so that it's pushed down, or, you can do this on the back side as well, so that instead of it being pushed in, it's actually a raised up line, but then you just will leave it at that. You're not going to do anything else to it. The second one is called a low relief. So that's where just this line here is raised. The middle part is on the same level as your background. And then we go into high relief, and we're going to call it high relief flat, where this shape is all the same height comparatively to the background. And then high relief rounded is pushed out the most. So you kind of have 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. Now, obviously, with our engraving, if you were to do it on the other side, you'd have a more subtle version of the low relief. And I hope that makes sense. When you're working on your metal, as I cut it off the sheet for you, I'm just going to put a mark on the back. We'll put a B for back. And it's going to be backwards to you because of the way that I'm videoing. But we'll put a B on the back, so you always know, okay, I'm working on the back side or the front. And then later on, that'll just come off with a little bit of rubbing alcohol and a cotton pad. So we'll just get rid of that. You will have an opportunity to color your final project. So again, coming into this video, you should have this work already done. And then you're also gonna have another shape as well for practice. Please do keep in mind, the edge of this metal is very, very sharp, okay? So handle with care. If you do have any of these little tails, almost like a hangnail, sticking up, please cut them off so you're not sticking yourself. If you're a nervous person about being cut, then you can always just run a bead of tape. I have some thinner masking tape I'll set out. You can run tape along the edges so that as you're working, you're not hurting your hands. Okay, so again, coming in, this work should already be done. I will keep the materials out here on this front table for you to collect as you guys start to work. Beyond the video and doing this practice sheet, you're going to keep this because this will be what you practice some of your textures on. And then this will also be a sheet that we can practice adding color later to. So keep your practice sheet. If you need more, I have more. So just ask. If you've used up your little space, that's fine. For this particular project, you guys are tooling metal, and I'll give you choices between 3 different types. So I have a silver aluminum. This is going to be the thinnest. So this is kind of the most unforgivable. Believe it or not, because it's thinner, it doesn't have as much stretch to the metal, which means you're not going to get the highest reliefs possible just because it's thinner. There's not enough thickness in the metal for it to stretch that far. It also leaves dents very easily. So this piece, I just cut it, and you can kind of, as I turn it to the light a little bit, you can see all the dents and divots in it already. The next piece I have is going to be a piece of sheet copper. It's kind of like that rose gold color. You can kind of see the bends and folds, so I just was rippling this a second ago, and those folds stay as well. Okay, so this is kind of the medium hardness. This particular metal and the gold color I have are the same thickness. However, the metal hardness is different because of the alloys that go into the metal. So the the other components, an alloyed metal has 2 or more types of metal mixed together. This particular one here is going to be the hardest. And so even though, again, they're the same thickness, this is probably the easiest to work on. So we're going to go easy, medium, most difficult, okay? Don't let that deter you. If you want to pick the silver, pick the silver. Just take your time through your practice steps. Okay. Once you have gone through the practice, the next thing you're going to do is select your imagery for your keep piece, so the project that you're going to turn in for a grade. It has to be nature-based. So the requirement for this particular project is your tooling or your embossing needs to be done with some sort of nature-based imagery. Whether that's something you print out or draw yourself. I don't have a preference. I printed out a few images and I want to kind of talk you through how I selected them. So I do like this because I like the clean crispness of it. I like the hard edges. I like the difference between the front petals versus the back petals and how they become like almost so soft you can't see them over here. And that would lend itself really, really well to embossing, the techniques we're going to use. The only thing I really don't like is that it's moving like backwards in space, and that is kind of difficult to achieve with the embossing, seeing as we're kind of pushing out the surfaces. So you want to be particular about that. That might mean I do some line or light, low relief here, and maybe some higher relief back here where the petals are almost coming out of the page without curling at the edges. Like this one's curling, this one's not. So moving backwards into space, I would have to, you know, pick different techniques to kind of achieve the overall likeness of this photo. So I'm going to set that one aside. I also, like I said, I had printed out this one and tinkered around with it, but I didn't really like how it was turning out, so I just kind of set that one aside. And then here, there's just not a whole lot of petal difference between the individual petals, so I kind of deterred from that. And then my last option, which is what I had settled on, is just kind of a sunflower here. I just picked flowers because it was the easiest thing to Google and print out. Every time I print out a photo, I always do multiple sizes because I'm never sure which one I want to work with until I really get it printed in person. Those print previews are kind of deceiving. So when you do finally select your image, copy and paste it a couple times and resize the image so you know what size you'd like to work with. My requirement for this, I would say about 6 inches by 6 inches, which really is not that big. This is about 6 inches here, which is why I'm working with my larger image. Now, obviously it's not a perfect square, so one side's a little larger than 6 inches and one side's a little shorter. Obviously we're gonna have to accommodate there just a little bit. And then at the end, once you're finished, you can always cut your foil into a different shape before framing it out. The frame part will come from a different video, and so will the coloring. So right now, let's just talk about tooling. After you have your piece cut, your practice done, sorry, I'm gonna bop over here. It comes in a roll, so I'll cut these for you because I don't want you to cut yourself. It is very sharp on the edge, and these do like to kind of unroll very quickly on you. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cut myself a piece of metal. This is where kind of my scraps come from that you guys are gonna do practice on, because I don't need this entire length of the piece, so I'm gonna cut it short, and then this extra will be someone else's practice piece. So I'll just set that aside. Okay, and I'm gonna move this back. Okay, when you're working, a few things you're gonna need to have handy. I printed in black and white, so any colored utensil would do. I prefer pen. It has kind of a softer edge to it. Whereas pencil, especially a mechanical, that's a really fine, thin line. Okay, again, you can practice and figure out which tools you like on your practice sheet. I prefer pen, and I like to use a different color so I know where I've traced. I will have my metal, my picture, a pair of scissors can always be found up there on that table. I prefer to work on paper as my hard surface, only because the desks and tables kind of have little chunks taken out of them from, gosh, who knows what. But I always work then on paper so that I don't have any of that yuckiness from the table picked up on my metal. And then we're gonna be working on felt sheets, and everyone's just gonna go ahead and grab 2 right off the bat. I don't care if they match in color, but they're stacked in there by color. That's how I bought the package. So I just grabbed 2 sheets. Permanent marker to mark which side is your back side. And then once you get cruising, you'll decide which tools you prefer to use. So some of these have a rounded tip end, or like a little ball on the end, a flatter side, more of a curve. This one's more of a stump at the end, so it works really well for rounded shapes. These are actually paper. They're called paper tortillions. Oops. It's basically just rolled paper. You may, I lost it. You may also hear them be called paper pencils. So blending sticks, paper pencils, paper tortillions. There's lots of different names for them, but I got 2 different sizes of these, and they're both double ends. So as we use them, one end, it's going to soften at the tips. Just happens. Wooden tools, and they have like a flatter side. Kind of see that side view, flat bottom, and then a pointy tip. This is a lot more subtle in comparison to my plastic tools, so that's more of a pointier tip. Sorry, I'm trying to hold it so that you guys can see it, maybe against the blue of that paper there. Pointier tip, again, flatter side, and then a flattening tool. So this one's very flat on all edges. Again, just a different type of that tool that's rounded at the tip. Oh yeah, hold it in front of the paper, Christina, like you said. And then they're double-sided, so they have different sizes on different sides. All right, so I decided I am working with this larger piece. I'm gonna go ahead and cut some of my extra paper off, just because that tends to get in my way. I don't need that much overhang. And before you start, you really want to think through your piece and decide what's pushed out, maybe line work, so that's low relief, what's pushed out kind of that flat, and what's pushed out the most, so that would be, my high relief areas that are rounded. What part would be engraved, and am I going to engrave from the front of my metal or from the back? So when I'm looking at my picture here, okay, so I would prefer the darker part to be pushed down more. So my finished piece on this actually might end up being the back of the metal instead of the front, which would be fine. So yeah, we're gonna just get cruising here. Metal, my design. As you cut it, I will mark B for back. To transfer your image, you're just gonna tape it down, and you do not need to tape around all 4 edges, but you certainly can. I'm gonna kind of stay off of my, I guess I don't need my felt sheets, I'm gonna be working on my paper. I'm gonna stay off of my image itself. I don't want the tape on there in case later on I need to refer back to my picture. I don't want that distorted. So I'm just gonna tape it on. I just did 2 corners. You can do all 4 corners, the sides, whatever's comfortable for you. And then you kind of want to work on a hard surface with a little cushion. So for me, that's going to be 3 or 4 pieces of paper. If you find that that doesn't transfer the image well enough for you to be able to see it, you can certainly do it on just one sheet of felt, not folded over, and that would be acceptable. So now I'm going to start transferring my image, which is where my colored utensil comes into play. Sorry, I bumped that. My colored utensil comes into play. So I am going to be just tracing over, pressing a little harder than I would normally with just a plain pencil. My pen, of course, then is going to stop working on me, but trying to outline. Okay. We're going to scratch the idea of a different colored pen since mine decided to stop working mid-video. But I can still see where I have drawn. So you're going to go around your image. And for me, mostly this is important in recognizing which petals might be in the front versus which petals are maybe pushed back a little bit. And take your time, go slow. So I'm just gonna go around my image here. I am not gonna do the whole thing. I'm gonna kind of stop 3/4 of the way. And then any other detail that I need transferred and I can't just put it in by eye or by hand, I'm gonna trace over again. Now, if you're gonna do a hand-drawn drawing, like you drew it yourself, what we'll do is we'll make a couple photocopies of it first, and you'll work over a photocopy instead of your original drawing. First of all, I always like to keep my original sketches to refer back to or use later on in the future. But also, if you want to refer back to your picture and you've drawn all over it, it's kind of hard to tell what you've done. So we'll make a quick photocopy of it first before you start working on your actual metal. And then I'm just gonna kind of go around here and do my little loop-de-loos around the center part where the middle of my flower will be. Again, I'm not gonna do all the big major detail. I'm just kind of grouping together those sections so that when I do cut this, or take the paper off rather, I can tell what's what. And that's a reason also that I always print out multiple photos so I can refer back to it. I'm not so much going to worry about this background yet on my image because it gets kind of fuzzy. And rather than mimicking what's here, I might just put like a texture in the background. And what I mean by that is, after I do my flower, rather than trying to mimic that subtle texture in the background of the foliage or the leaves, I may just choose to go in and do a textured line or maybe a swirly pattern or something else just to fill in that space. You could also obviously just make your image big enough when you print it out that you're just doing the part of it you want to. I just printed out a couple randoms and still have that background. So we're gonna move forward. I'm then going to take, and just before you completely untape it, make sure you can actually see your outline or what you've, oh gosh, that glare is awful off those fluorescent lights, but that way you can actually see the parts that you've done. And then next, sometimes what I like to do just on my photos so I don't get lost when I start working is decide what's gonna be high relief, what's gonna be low relief, and what's gonna be engraved. I might label that here on my picture or just write it on a separate sheet. So I'm gonna do kind of a, from the back, for my lowest part here, this is gonna be engraved front. I put EF for front. This next set of dots that's a little further out from my ring, so I'm doing the very middle part, is gonna be pushed down the most. So I'm gonna engrave that from the front. Then these, which are kind of pushed up a little bit more, I'm gonna engrave again from the back. And then there is even more kind of out here around that I'll engrave from the back, but I might layer it up a second time. So I might fold my felt up. Instead of just doing one single sheet, I would either double layer it, or I might just take a single sheet and fold it so that I have kind of that thickness. With 2 sheets, you can do not only 1 layer, you could do 2 layers. I could do a 3rd layer by just laying it flat over my single sheet here, or I can double it over and have 4. So that gives you a lot of depth to play around with. Now, even though the high relief is really going to be what we have when we fold over our felt, using those strategic folding on your felt will help you kind of decide, again, those depths. So now that I have my design on the back side, I'm going to start working and actually tracing it over. So where I have decided I'm going to do my engraving, I might start with a smaller tool with a smaller ball tip in the center there and just start pushing from the back. So I decided that this outer layer will be pushed from the back and the inner layer will be pushed from the front. So I'm just going to kind of go through and dot that. And before I commit to it, I'm just going to check. This is what you would do on your practice sheet. I'm going to just show you as I go. So I have some small, I did just a series of dots there. And if I don't think that they're pushed out enough, then I'll go ahead right away and just start layering my felt. you're going to do this on your practice piece. I'm just kind of working through some of the issues you're going to come along, or some decisions you're going to have to make as you go. So then I'll show you kind of next to it the difference between working over just a layer of paper versus working over a layer of felt. And it's going to be tough to tell, but again with the light. So you can see you have a more subtle kind of here at the bottom, and then they start to push out a little bit more where I've started to layer the felt. I personally like the felt layer better, so I would just keep going with that. And really that's it, you guys. You just need to work through kind of the process, and the practice sheet really should answer some of those questions for you. Again, if you start putting it on your sheet and you're not sure which technique to go with, obviously ask, but then practice on a practice sheet. And if you run out, just ask for more. Okay? Good luck.